to day 2 of Groundswell. We're bringing you a special podcast series for the Farmer's Guardian podcast, brought to you by the School of Sustainable Food and Farming at Harper Adams University. This particular session is going to focus on soils, so I'm joined by some fantastic panellists here. Izzy, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Yes, hi, my name's Izzy Eames and I'm the AHDB Cereals Oilseeds Knowledge Exchange Manager for the North East and a beef and sheep farmer from the North West.
And Louise?
Yes, Louise Penn. I'm an agronomist and farming consultant working for Ceres Rural, and I also have a family farm, so mixed family farm, which I'm very involved in as well.
And Silas?
I'm a regenerative farmer of many, many years, most recently farm manager at FAI Farms in Oxford, which is a research and consultancy farm. But as of yesterday, I'm now self-employed regenerative coaching consultant.
Fantastic. So soils obviously is becoming an increasingly big asset to the farm. In terms of building that resilient farm business, how pivotable is soils?
Yeah, massively. I think from my sort of HDB hat, when I have that on, it's like soils, to have soils functioning is, for us at HDB as a levy board, is absolutely massive. If your soils aren't functioning, you aren't getting those yields, you aren't getting that sort of profit coming into the business. And for us at HDB, we collect levy based on sort of tonnes of grain sold, tonnes of oilseed sold. So for us, it's a bad deal if the soils aren't functioning properly. It means that we can't then reinvest into what levy payers want. So yeah, it's massively important.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the kind of pivotal moment in my career was when I became interested in regenerative agriculture. Was someone said to me, might have been Gabe Brown, can't remember, but it said, you can't grow good green stuff if you don't have good brown stuff. And that is something that sent me down this path and into this rabbit hole of regenerative farming. And actually it's so true. We focus on we can see because it's there, but there is so much that goes on underground. I think even all this, the speakers here, there's still so much that we don't know.
And when you're speaking to your farmers, in terms of kind of initial advice to really start off on that journey, what kind of top tips do you have?
I think just find communities of people to be around who are trying to encourage you on that same path. And I think everyone's at such different spaces, and I think it's so important to join something. Like, it doesn't have to be HDB, it could be something like going to Groundswell, you could be going to Innovative Farmers, or some of those other organisations who are doing this really fun group, bringing people together who are all passionate. And I think going there and having an understanding of what others are doing, and then going home and trying to see how that would fit in at your farm at home. But I do think it's massively context specific, which I think everyone talks about here. It's one thing that works on one person's farm might not on the other. So I think it's massively about going out, getting that knowledge exchange, speaking to lots of people, getting loads of ideas, doing lots of listening. You can read all that you want, but it's always the listening, I think, that sort of counts.
And Silas, specifically on your farm, how are you nurturing your soil?
Well, the key thing with soils is they're just the priming medium in the middle of converting energy, which is free, into energy we consume, right? So if you have a fully functional, amazing, healthy soil, then you maximise the energy to produce and also the cash flow and everything else from your business. And if you have poor soils because of poor management or whatever, poor historical, whatever it could be, you're essentially bottlenecking all of your soil nutrition, everything goes into your crops and everything else, and that hinders your business financially, right? So everything that I design my farming systems around is about working with nature and designing everything around ecosystem processes. How do we get as much carbon and minerals and water and airflow going through our farming systems, which primes and pumps that energy flow overall that creates nutritious, dense food from as little input or no input as possible. So for me, that's the aim of the game. So when we get a great big massive drought like we had in 2022, it doesn't actually affect my farm or my business. I'm still grazing tall dense grass and leaving half behind, and I've got a 3-month rotation because I've been able to adapt and move the grazing plan around it. Whereas all the neighbours are slightly in a bit of bother. And that's essentially down to how our soils are functioning because of how we design a system around the whole point.
When you're first starting out, is there an element of you kind of just have to hold your nerve, that you're essentially trying to change the ecology and change the kind of dynamic of the soil? Is there there's going to be challenges initially, isn't there, from the outset?
I think there's, from one of the conversations, and probably Silas would know more, I think I'm at the start on my farm at home of this. I mean, we're an upland beef and sheep farm. We've never been high input or anything like that, but we're definitely at the start of this sort of journey. But I think there's always challenges throughout. Not just at the start. And I think again, it's having those people around you to help advise you and guide you, and when things go wrong. And it really, someone spoke yesterday, and it really struck me. And they said, this way of farming is very much like a snakes and ladders sort of thing, and you go up this ladder and you get to this next level, and then you get the snake and you go back down again. You're like, oh my God, it's all gone wrong. And actually, no, it's not. Everything that happens is a way to learn again and sort of enhance your own sort of experience of it. So yeah, I don't think it's as much as I find. I say going off on one now. When I feel my most glass half empty is when I'm doing something on our farm that is damaging the soils, and it's things like last week we applied some fertiliser. It rained solidly for a week, and all I could think of is that fertiliser's leached out the profile. It's not gone into the grass. It's also then we've lost some money. I'm thinking that is just a massive problem. Whereas every time I think about regenerative agriculture, when I think about that field that's going into a herbal ley, I then think glass half full. I'm like, so why can't we provide that nitrogen? Why aren't my soils functioning to allow me to do that? Why am I not going to pull this plaster off and try and understand it? And so I think it's more of a solutions thing. It's the challenges. It's more of a finding a solution, maybe.
I really like that snake and ladders analogy.
I really like that.
I heard it and I was like, yeah, it's so true.
Would you say in terms of your experiences, it is a bit like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, we have things happen mostly linked to the weather. I do think this year, with the amount of rainfall that we've had, we were talking, John Kemp, morning session yesterday, amazing, and he was talking about, we've got regeneration of soils and degeneration of soils, and with all the rain that we've had, we're going to have some pretty anaerobic conditions. We're going to have lost probably quite a lot of soil biology. Even rainfall can actually compact your soils and reduce the bulk density. So there's a lot of fields that are bare or headlands that are bare, and I'm getting all my clients to put summer cover crops in if they're that way minded. But I think this is definitely, we've had a ladder this year, but I think being a good consultant or being a good farmer is recognising that, okay, we've gone down the ladder. We've gone down the snake, sorry. Whilst I played snakes and ladders, how can we regenerate that? And I think as long as you're slowly going in the right direction, it's going to be a wiggly line. It's not a straight line.
I think Silas alluded to it as well. It's like we're at the mercy of the weather, aren't we, really? You can do as much as you can, but it's all about trying to make your soils function well so that when we have these adverse weather, we can...
You're able to handle it.
I guess the point is, how do we make the snakes as short as possible and the ladders as big as possible, right? Whereas in a more degradative, whatever the word is, system, the snakes are longer than the ladders, right? So you go up a little ladder, you come down a big snake, and you start again. So how do you build that resilience into your farming system and your agribusiness just through good management? Because ultimately, Mother Nature's going to do a way better job than we will. There's this whole interconnectedness of these different systems. Your soil system, your plant system, your livestock system, us as a human system, and then a wider ecosystem above that. The one thing that will muck up the whole thing is the human system. So for me, I'm quite lazy. Some people call it effective. I'm like, right, get out the bloody way and let Mother Nature do her thing. And I'm very much a grazing guy. And I know there's more nuance and you've got to be more direct in arable stuff, which all about, because ultimately you're fighting nature more. If you're going to try and grow monoculture wheat, that is exactly what nature doesn't want to do. If you want to produce amazingly resilient, diverse pastures that pump and prime your ecosystem processes, just get the hell out of the way and just use your grazing animal impact in time. That's the only thing I'm tweaking is those three things, and let nature do the hard work.
And I wanted to touch upon livestock grazing and how you can implement that into your system to protect your soils. So how are you doing that on your farm?
Well, it's very easy for me because my farm, or I say my farm, the farm I've just left is mainly all permanent pasture. It's 1,500 acres, half of that's on a floodplain. The one thing it does do is grow good grass, but where the massive low-hanging fruit is, and I'm sure this is exactly what you guys are seeing with your cereals arable hat on, there's so many tens of thousands of hectares out there of arable ground that hasn't got livestock on. And whilst putting sheep or whatever onto your cereal crop might not increase the yield of that cereal crop, what it will do is decrease your reliance on fungicides and herbicides and all the input costs around it, right?
So do you think there is that mindset change around yield that farmers need to understand? And is that changing?
I think I've got my clients that are, very driven by yield, and we all need to be driven by yield, because at the end of the day, if we're not making money, we've got to think about the bottom line, and actually cash is king.
Yeah.
And I'm very much on the page with that with all of my clients, but there are different routes to get there, and I think that, you know, in time, if you can have that trend and increase your soil health, your yields are going to go with it.
I think you have to be realistic about yield though as well, about what you actually think you can produce from an area of land. Like, there's a lot of farms who I work with, they're expecting these 12-ton crops and they're just pumping them full of things, and realistically they're never going to really get that 12-ton. But they sort of looking at, again, at the yield thing, and it's like with us at AHDB, we have this benchmarking program, and it's crazy the amount of people who have no idea what a gross margin looks like, and actually like building that up over a number of years, like using things like yield maps and like taking areas of the farm out that are never going to produce those 12-ton crops.
Variable nitrogen,
massively.
Reducing nitrogen, on-farm trials.
Yeah, definitely. It's just getting a bit more creative and having a bit more, what's the word, curiosity about it.
And the key thing you said was the gross margin. Like, park yield to the side. If you've got a massive yield but you're losing money on it per ton, you're better off having less yield because you're losing less money, right? So go for your gross margin. How do we cut as much cost out of the whole thing as possible with as much output that we can do with limited cost, and then chuck that over your overheads, right? And as again, that whole precise, like, right, well, this farm or this corner of that field never does good, let's put it into a bit of SFI wildflower seed or something instead of trying to put it into wheat. So, and then you do your enterprise stacking, chuck the sheep on it and your pigs or whatever else, and all of a sudden, as well as your wheat and your SFI, you're chucking out 2 or 3 other enterprises without much more input cost and no more overheads often.
Something that's come up repeatedly across all the sessions is that idea of data collection, monitoring and evaluating. When it comes to soils, what tools are we using and how are you keeping across, you know, the value of your soils?
I think, well, it's going to have to do AHDB plug again, but it's quite, I mean, Silas, you probably do something so much more technical, but from AHDB's perspective, we have this soil health scorecard, which is basically the like biological, chemical and physical indicators, and there's sort of 8 indicators, and the idea is that farmers can go and do that themselves. I mean, if you have like great agronomists like Louise, like they've got a lot of integrity, whereas there's some agronomists who will be going out to farmers and not really putting them first when they do some of these assessments. And the idea is that a farmer can go into that field, and yeah, fair enough, there's some really in-depth biological indicators out there now, but to bring everyone along with you, it's starting at something that's quite simple and easy to understand and very proven.
I think that's
which
key,
is like earthworms.
Is a basic.
Yeah, earthworm counts. Like we can get farmers going out and getting an understanding about what each earthworm does and what can they bring to the soil, and then they go on that basic journey, and then after that they get more interest in it, and then you start to take themselves away. Yeah. And then you can go into maybe some of the more in-depth ones. But I don't know, there's some other indicators out there, isn't there?
The whole point really is trying to get farmers to be as observational as possible, right? The more observational you are, and what's the word, I guess, active in your observations, i.e. you log it and you change or pivot, tack course, whatever, based on what you see. They're the farms and farmers that generally have really good farm businesses because they're actually reading and interpreting their landscape. Essentially, there's 3 aspects of soil health, right? There's the physical structure and the physics, there's the soil biology, and there's the soil chemistry. And often, agronomists in the past, not Louise, obviously, she's wonderful, all the focus on the chemistry side. But actually, if we think, right, how through our management can we improve the soil physical structure, that opens up the movement of the chemistry and the mineral cycle, as well as the soil microbiology that facilitates all the nutrition to be more effective, and as well as getting more carbon as the ecosystem process being pumped and primed through that system. So in terms of the data and the baselining and things you're monitoring, how do we keep an eye on not only the chemistry side with your lab stuff, which also is limited because you're only picking up in the test what the test's able to read, and there's so much going on down there that we've got no idea about. You know, you can do a soil sample and take the crop or the pasture right above the soil, and they'll have a really high reading of something in the soil and it won't even be in the pasture, or vice versa, right? So do the tests and observe, but I think the point is to get farmers out there and do the digging the hole and look at the thing.
And I think, that's true. As an agronomist, it's all very well me going and doing these things, but it's trying to get your clients to come with you. You know, if I'm going to go and take a spade and dig a hole in the soil, I want my client to be there and we can talk through it together, and sit down with your agronomist and going through the tests and actually working out some solutions of what to do. But it does take a really long time. There's a lot of attention to detail to get that, the chemistry balance, they're the ones that are going out with the kit. Really, realistically, if you're going to go and do some cultivation, you should be digging, having a go, digging behind, seeing if you really need to do it, seeing if you've got the machine set up properly. But, we can't always be there. So I think a lot of it is the education of farmers.
And in terms of policy and government policy, do you think there is a real understanding now of the value of soils and supporting farmers in protecting their soils? Do you think there is enough focus within sustainable farming incentive, for example?
Again, it goes back to trying to bring everyone along with you, and I think the government with the SFI is, as much as it's maybe been a bit of a fragmented approach and here, there and everywhere, is that it does start a really good base for trying to get people onto this pathway and getting a bit more of an understanding. And again, you only really get the full benefit if you go out and do it yourself. So the SAM 1, again, is a really basic entry-level thing, but it's great to then just get people to start observing it and getting that understanding. So I do think they understand why it's important and how it's important. I think it just needs to go all the way up the chain. I mean, I went on a really good talk before about how it's not in with the chefs, and chefs are actually such a mouthpiece for producers. And I think it has to go all the way up the chain. But I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the options available under SFI, they are actually supporting stuff for people who are farming regeneratively, which is really great. And I think, if we can keep doing some of those things and generating that on-farm data, but I think they want to keep listening to what we want. And my problem is with some of my clients, you can design, because they've all got rules, if you're not careful, you're kind of reducing that flexibility, like there's a no-till option, but then, you can't, that you are restricted to what you can do, and you've got a no-till for 3 years, you can load a subsoil, but if we get a big rainfall event and we've got some compaction, you don't want to be too limited.
Yeah.
So I think
got to be able to adapt it.
Yeah,
it's got to be flexible, but it also actually does have to have a bit of rigour behind it, because when I look at the multi-species cover crop, well, it's like 2 species, and in my mind that is nowhere near a multi-species.
Well, I think the point of all this is we're here at Groundswell right now, which is such a massive, huge hub of energy and people, but the people here right now are from across the whole supply chain. There's people here from the government, and there's also people with 1 acre that are just growing asparagus and everything in between, right? And I think that's the unique thing in the UK is UK sometimes gets a bit, I don't know what the word is to describe it, but the negativity sometimes around the subsidy stuff. What it's doing is encouraging people to go in a better direction, whatever their intentions. So whether they're just doing it to cash in on the 380 quid a hectare or whatever you get for a herbal lay, or if they're doing it because they actually really want the herbal lay because they want to bring in sheep and increase diversity and want that living root and they really get it, it doesn't matter. The point is that they've done it, and the land base, whatever the intention of the human in that system, is hopefully moving forward. And that's a blanket option for every single land owner in the country that is managing land to produce food. Whereas you look at other countries, say New Zealand, where I'm from and my family farms are, none of that is there. And you actually drive around New Zealand, and I'm going to get in trouble now, you look at this lovely green productive landscape, and actually it's pretty dire in lots of places. It's nailed, it's huge amount of production, massive amount of fertilizer input, because the whole model is based around production. No one's really thinking about the wider thing around biodiversity, public money for public good, and soil health and all that stuff. Whereas in the UK, it really does. So obviously SFI is evolving and improving it, and they're making it better, and it is getting better, more and more people are signing up. But the point is it's there, and it is pulling the whole industry in the right direction.
And I think you make a really good point as well. It's we're so fortunate in that sense, because there's some Argentinian farmers that came to visit us at Cereals and talking about cover crops, and they were wanting to go into cover crops. And I said, well, why are you doing that? Is there any funding? And they said, nothing available for them.
Yeah, John Kemp said that yesterday. There's nothing in America either, really.
And I think I think that's the whole public money for public goods. When you start to realise what your land can produce and give to others, and actually how much it affects the communities around you, then you get a real appreciation. And this money isn't for free, technically. We're all contributing into it. So it's really utilising that and making sure you have a real appreciation, empower yourself of what farmers can do with the land.
And I think that's also important, that when you are delivering these actions, that you do take some ownership on. You are delivering a public good. So if you're going to grow a cover crop, or you're going to put a herbal lay or some pollen and nectar mix, as much you should be looking after that, because that is going to benefit your soil. We are also being paid to deliver something. So we should be putting a lot of effort in, a lot of attention to detail to make sure that we are using that money correctly.
Definitely. And it could all go downhill, couldn't it, with those actions if they aren't managed correctly.
If we don't do it properly, we won't have it.
Yeah.
Obviously, food security and domestic food production is being talked about a lot. In terms of that role of soils within that, how pivotal is that?
The main thing, right?
Yeah, it's the
Again,
foundation,
like if your
isn't it?
soils are able to produce 2 or 3 times more output or energy from the same hectare, that's your food security right there. If you've nailed your soils to the point where everything's in a massive bottleneck, then the amount of food that we can produce on this puddle of rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and wherever we are, right, it's reduced. So soil health is everything. How can we produce more from less? By working with nature, right?
It's the whole cycle, isn't it? You know, I don't think you can just isolate soils, because you didn't have those like living roots, you didn't have the water and all that. You wouldn't have soils. You just have like rock.
Yeah.
So it's like that
we need
whole,
the soil. We need the water.
It's all of it. It's all in this one
water security.
cycle,
It's everything.
Yeah, and that's such a key point. Everyone here, or not everyone here, but like everyone in the industry is so obsessed, blinkered on carbon. Actually, the biggest issue on our planet is the broken water cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? The movement of water from not enough in the right place to too much in the atmosphere is what's actually causing the main heating effect and these massive, huge weather events. And when everyone talks about resilience in our farming system, it usually rolls around a broken water cycle. We're in a drought. Stuff didn't work. It's too wet. It's too dry. Whatever. So your soils and the ability of those to prime and move that water cycle, because actually water cycle is all about slowing the water down. Carbon cycle, mineral cycle, all the nutrient stuff, we want to speed it up. We want as much going as quick as possible because it's productive, right? It's a cycle. Water, we want to slow that stuff down.
It's
So
all
how through
interlinked,
landscape
isn't it? That's the thing. We
design,
should be treating everything in isolation. Actually, you know, biodiversity, soils, water and waste, everything is all linked and connected together rather than isolating it.
Yeah.
and
then,
nutrient density with food, right?
Yeah, that's like literally
Huge
what I was
health
going to say.
problem.
Yeah.
Imagine if all the food we ate in this country was higher in micronutrients, phytochemicals,
And
all
then
that
there wouldn't be the
stuff.
pressure on the NHS. You know, some really great talks yesterday on that. You know, my interest in the soil microbiome has led to my interest in my gut microbiome, and that is so interlinked. And I think that, you know, everyone on the show will be very thinking about, you know, reducing eating ultra processed foods and all of that. But it's all interlinked, and it's just I want the rest of the world to just wake up and be like, you know, why does not everyone care about it in the same way that we do?
And something that's really, you know, a hot topic at the moment is public procurement, being able to produce food for our hospitals, for our schools, locally produced high nutrient food, and how are we going to get to that point?
I think the problem is right now is there's obviously loads of farmers out there that are producing food just like that, and it's just getting sucked into and absorbed and diluted into the normal supply chain. There's not actually a proper integrated supply chain to get that product from multiple farms that can be delivered at scale to the destination it needs to be, like the NHS. It's just absorbed into everything else, right? So, you know, it's like, did you get a good beetroot or a bad one? Like, you don't know, right? You just get a beetroot or whatever it might be.
Well, someone said this morning, we were eating breakfast this morning, me and my friends were camping together, and someone said, someone asked apparently a question at a talk yesterday, is it, you know, if you're producing wheat regeneratively, but then it's put in, you know, the produce from your crop is put into like a pot noodle.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah,
so is there such thing as a regen pot noodle?
Yeah, like is that healthy? You know, we can produce crops in a very healthy way and reduce all the inputs, but then if it's just getting put in ultra processed food with all of the rubbish and the ingredients that you don't understand.
Imagine
you know.
the boiling water in a pot noodle would just nuke all the goodness out of it, anyway, as well as the plastic in the cup.
But I just thought that was really interesting.
But I think it is, again, it's the whole way up the chain. It's the doctors. Like, I had an interesting doctor talk yesterday, and he was just saying, you know, it's about his quality of life as a doctor, rather than, and the parallels between agriculture and pharmacy are huge. And there's amount of healthcare professionals that are here, and they're sort of saying it's like, you know, you get paid to prescribe patients with diabetes medicine. You don't get paid to improve their health. And so it all starts, when the doctors start to understand it. I think the veterinary are now understanding it, and the agronomists are understanding it, and getting a bit more of a passion about how can we actually find a solution without being paid by like big pharma and big agriculture. So I think it's empowering people and getting them all together, and things like this are so great for that.
Yeah, 9,000 people here, or whatever it is. You know, it's definitely there is stuff happening, and I just, I can't wait to see like 10, 20 years time, how things have changed.
The hook on all that's the soil, right? Because you do not produce good quality, high nutrient dense food without the soil to produce it, and the soil is what then pulls through that whole supply chain. Healthy pastures, healthy crops, healthy food, healthy people, healthy ecosystem, right? Healthy economy. That's the foundation you need to get right. All these things are completely so interconnected. You cannot separate them and expect to get a good outcome by managing one thing over the other. You've got to manage your cropping or your plant system or whatever to make sure your soil is in a position where it can then produce a healthy, nutritional food product.
That's what I mean. Right? You can't say food security without being like how nourishing is it and how good quality is it. It should be what is the food quality of what we're eating.
And I think that narrative is slowly changing, but there's more to be done around that. I'm conscious that I need to wrap up now, but I really want to put to you this final question, which is, where do you see the future of British agriculture? It's quite a broad one. That's a big one. Where do you see it?
I see, in my mind, I see future British agriculture as just having much greater appreciation for what we can provide as farmers. A united front of empowered farmers who understand what their bit of land is doing for so many millions of people, and also for so many millions of biodiversity, insects, animals, and all that sort of stuff. And I think just a lot more of an understanding about what we can actually provide as farmers. I don't know, I think probably add to that in a minute.
Yeah, I think as an agronomist, I want us to be at the forefront of agriculture, and I think there's so much more innovation that we can do in terms of the varieties that we've got, more precision when we're applying all these inputs.
Touched upon is the innovation and technology side of things.
If we could, I've got a drone, I should be able to be doing more things with that. I think there's a lot more innovation, and that if you walk around and some of the stuff that's coming through, it is really exciting. And I'd like to be doing more attention to detail, and I think we are going in that direction.
Silas?
I think we're very diverse, and basically what you want you'll find. So in the UK, if you're a small farmer, you can make it work by direct selling. The market's there, the logistics are there to make it work. If you're a big guy on 10,000 acres, you can make that work too. Not only that, you've also got options to also find and create your own supply chains locally, whether you're big or small. Whereas, for example, in New Zealand, if you've got a 50-acre farm, you can't direct sell because you can't get a courier there to send it around. So you can't make money in New Zealand unless you've got scales and efficiency. Whereas over here, it's inclusive in that sense. You can make your business work depending on what you're starting with. You just tweak and change the model. But I think what will happen is the majority of land managers will be farming in a more agroecological way, whether it's because of the understanding and the knowledge sharing at places like Groundswell and the energy and the movement and all the stuff in the media that makes people aware of it, or if it's the stuff like SFI that is more of a financial encouragement, right?
Brilliant. Well, Izzy, Louise, Silas, thank you ever so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.